Hey Josh, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, really good. Really good to finally have you on the podcast. I know it's been a while since first started talking. I'm massively excited to have you on. I saw your I was about to say I saw your helmet, but that does sound a bit dirty. But I did
Yeah,
see
well,
the bike helmet that you showed earlier. So it looks really cool. I'm really excited to have you on.
thanks, mate. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about my helmet every day. It gets a bit weird sometimes, but
Do you have to kind of this is getting quite vulgar and very early on, but like do you kind of have
right.
to say bike helmet? You have to correct yourself every time?
Yeah, well, exactly. It's bike or scooter helmet, so we need
Yeah,
to make
bike
sure
or
to keep
scooter
that
helmet. Okay.
scooter market's gone crazy. But you're right. There's a lot of helmet chat in the office all the time, so we have to be careful. We've got to be careful.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to have you on because obviously biking is massive, scootering is something that's growing massively. Like I didn't even think about it until you just mentioned it there, but you see a lot of people on scooters now. They used to be just like toys for kids, but now it's like a legitimate way of traveling around big
Yeah.
cities, like even in London, right? I think they might be like illegal on the streets, but in a lot of cities across Europe, instead of like Boris bikes, they have scooters that you can rent. So I know it's huge.
It's gone crazy. It's gone absolutely crazy. I mean, because they're coming to. I live in London, and they're coming to London next month. I think it is. Some people have just won a tender to launch, and it's literally like a war zone. It's like land grabbing because you've got all of these massive scooter companies
Mm.
who are all raising hundreds of millions of pounds. I mean, every day I'd sort of log online. I say it's like Dot have raised 80 million or whatever. There's a bunch of them, and they're all fighting for these different tenders in these different cities. So when we first started, we were obviously focused on bikes. The whole thing
Yeah.
was about cycling because it was all going crazy. And then during the couple of years that we've been going, scooters just went kapow.
Mm.
And now we've got to start bringing the word e-scooter into our vernacular. So it was a
Yeah.
bike helmet, bike and scooter helmet, but it's gone bonkers, and they're quite fun. They're good machines to get on.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean that's only good news for you, right? Because like for you, the product doesn't change whatsoever. It's still the same product, but it's just like a completely
Mm,
new market's open to you, which is really cool.
yeah.
So it's just like it's amazing news for you guys, right?
Yeah, it was great news. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you read all the time, and I think first on the list for a successful business is timing. I
Yeah,
believe, and we're just at that moment now where it's taking off. So COVID happened. There you go. We've got 10 seconds in, and the word COVID's been mentioned. I told myself I wasn't going to say it, but I did.
we haven't mentioned
Um,
it for a few episodes, so you've just broke the.
yeah,
There we
I
go. It's all
ruined.
right.
Edit it out. Edit it out. But COVID came and cycling went crazy, and then scooters are now going crazy too, which means that the timing aspect of it all is really great for us. It's only a good thing. So, and I think the world is kind of tiny bit skeptical about e-scooters,
Mm.
especially in the UK market, because there's been some horror stories where people have had problems. Therefore, it can be supported by helmet use, which is perfect because
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
why we use this. Yeah.
So let's kind of talk a bit more about the product, a bit more about the business, because obviously, like we spoke about it before we hit record, but there are quite a few foldable helmets out there. So where did your kind of journey begin with Newlane and to actually become the people behind the new the new foldable helmet?
Yeah, sure. I've got it here, so I will show it in a second. The big reveal,
A bit of
but
suspense before the reveal.
yeah, we'll build it up a bit. We'll build it up a bit. So it was about 2018, I think it was, and my background is that I co-founded a brand agency when I was straight out of university. So we're working with some of the world's leading brands: Unilever, Nestle, Samsung. It was quite cool. And I found myself flying around the world all the time. So I was in New York quite a lot. I was in Switzerland quite a lot. Sounds glamorous, but it wasn't. And I was going in between meetings by tube or subway, by Ubers, by public transport. And I always talk about how I got sick and tired of sweaty people's armpits in my face on
Mate,
the
I do
tube.
not I do not miss
Uh,
that at all.
in New York, it was diabolical. Literally, you get on the tube you get in the subway in the summer, and it's horrendous. And I was sick and tired of spending a lot of money on Ubers, nightmare. So you had to pay so much money, and also traffic is a problem. So I became obsessed with cycling as a mode of transport, I used to think that people would dress up in lycra, shiny gear, look like an idiot, wear those stupid cycling hats, have a bunch of them, cycling around. But I actually realized that jumping on a hire bike was a really great way of getting around. So not only is it good for the planet, it's better for the planet than getting an Uber. It's also good for your pocket. It's a lot cheaper,
Yeah.
and so it's convenient because you know the timings that you're going to get from A to B, and it's also good for your health. I frequently need to lose weight, so it's really good to have functional exercise. As you're going from A to
Yeah,
B.
of course.
Um, so I became obsessed with it as a way of getting around, essentially. So I was jumping on hired schemes wherever I was. But the way Newlane was born is that I was riding over Waterloo Bridge in central London, and I found myself in between two buses and a motorbike on a high bike. Wasn't wearing a helmet because I was going to a meeting and I didn't want to carry a big, clunky, bulky thing with me. I didn't even want to know. I didn't even want to show people that I was cycling.
Yeah,
And I got shaken. I was like, if I fall off my bike right now in between these two massive buses and this
that's it.
motorbike literally, zoom, I'm in trouble. So I basically said, right, let's see if there's such a thing as a folding bike helmet. So I can stick it in my bag and it's gone. Started looking into the market. And as you say, there were quite a few. But none of them were speaking to me. None of them reached out. I didn't want to buy any of them. They were either too expensive. They looked a bit shit. I just didn't really want them.
Yeah,
So I basically went, right, that's it. Let's go on the process of making one that I would actually buy. I then was working with a guy called Dom at the time, Dom Cotton, who's now my co-founder, who's an avid cyclist, been cycling and commuting around London for years. And he's the guy who you see rolling down the street with a big helmet sort of snapped to their rucksack. And I went, Dom, that looks really bad and it must be really annoying, right? And he goes, you know what? I've got used to it, but it is annoying. And I
yeah.
was like, well, why have you got used to it? It's not good enough. I was like, did you know that folding helmets exist? And he went, what? No. Bearing in mind he's a big cyclist.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was on, come on, mate, join me. Let's do this. Let's create a folding bike helmet that we would actually use. And 2
That's
years
pretty
later, we
crazy.
got almost a launch.
But no sort
Yeah,
of like engineering or product background. Like your previous background was in like, yeah, it was adverts, you said, marketing agency,
yeah,
brand
brand.
agency. So
Yeah.
like no background in sort of product manufacturing, that sort of stuff. That's pretty crazy. So you just literally got the idea, you had a bit of validation that other people were kind of doing it, but you saw a gap there that you can do things better. And I think I put a
Mm,
post about this on my Instagram saying like steps for knowing that your idea is good, like the validation. One of them is someone else is doing it, but you can do it better, or
yeah,
that no one else is doing it, but people are looking for a solution for that problem. So it's kind of like
yeah.
two sides of the same thing. So that's really cool. So how did you kind of, what was the sort of next step? Because you had the idea, like what was the sort of next step?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you say, I think part of the big challenge of it all was that I'm not a designer and engineer, as you just said. I'm a sales guy, really. And Dom is an ex BBC sports presenter and a
Wow.
charity man. So you combine our two skill sets. We've obviously never made a product before, but I think we're going to get into what's some advice for some people trying to set up hardware. And I think retaining what we call as blind optimism is really important, because if we knew half of the things that we have come across over the past 2 years, we probably wouldn't have done it, or we would have done it in a very different way. But blind optimism is important because it's been no, of course we can do that. It's fine, and you just sort of keep going and going and going. That entrepreneurial passion in you
Yeah.
means that you keep going through the challenges. But the first step, I mean, the next step after having the idea was to find a designer. So we found a guy called Will, who's a concept designer based out of Vauxhall. He's worked on an Aston Martin speedboat before. I got introduced to him by a friend, and I went to his office and I went, mate, I haven't really got any money. I've got a little bit, I've got a bit of savings, and I want to create this thing. Can you help me? And he went, yeah, sure, we can do something. So we worked with him for a while, developing what we've got now, which is essentially the flip clip mechanism.
There
So I
we
might as well
go.
quickly.
It's out.
So this is a. So,
For all
so
the
this is
audio,
a.
all your listeners are missing out right now, but it's all right. We'll
Yeah,
carry on.
for all the listeners, I would explain it with my amazing words. But this is a production sample that's come off the the tool that we've just had created, the manufacturing tool. So essentially, the way that it works is the top rim, the crown, if you can imagine a helmet, audio listeners, is currently flipping round and it sits into the rim like that. So you can see there the measurement is about 81 millimeters. So it's about the size of the palm of my hand, if you can imagine
Mm.
the palm of your hand. And it's easily stowed into a bag or a rucksack. So the first stage really was going through multiple different concepts and designs to get to a place where we felt this was actually a bit different or very different
Yeah.
to what's out there at the moment. So it was all about simplicity, it was about look, and it was about price. Those are
Mm.
really the three things that we focused on. And yeah, we went through multiple iterations, many failures, many challenges, many problems. We've completely changed the design multiple times. So we've burnt some cash, but that's part of the course.
Yeah, it's part of the
Um,
process.
and we are almost gearing up for launch. So
That's
that
really
was
exciting. So just a quick question about, I guess, how you move from the designing phase to actually getting a physical product. Before we move on to that, as you mentioned before, that there are a few players already in the market, but you saw them and you were like, I could do something better here. What are the kind of how did you kind of test that? As in, like, how did you kind of on what metrics did you decide that we could do better? And like, how did you kind of match that up with what consumers want, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So we were very lucky because we won a grant from Innovate UK. And any, I guess, British entrepreneur out there who's doing something should have a look at the competitions that Innovate UK run. So if anyone that doesn't know, they're the essentially the government's innovation arm, and they have pots of cash that they give to companies to do something. So in our instance, it was to do a research project, a 3 month research project, which was understanding whether or not this was actually a goer. So
Mm.
before you leave your jobs, Josh and Dom, you go out there, speak to consumers, and find out what it is they actually want, or if they even want a folding helmet at all.
Yeah.
So that's why it was amazing because they gave us money to do that. Whereas what some people do is they jump straight into product design and they forget that actually someone's going to buy it. So it's the typical story of designers sitting in their ivory tower. But
It applies to
we won the
software as
money.
well, by the way. Same
Yeah,
thing. Like, people
yeah,
just develop softwares for no reason, like no addressing no real problem, you know. So the
yeah.
same applies.
It's like the app stores full of a million apps, and
Yeah,
90% of them just aren't even used, are they? They
yeah,
just sit there. But was that one that went crazy? Flappy Birds, whatever it was called.
yeah. Well, I mean, although that was going on for a long time. Yeah, Flappy Bird, I think it was. Yeah, and then there was loads of spin-off ones from there. Um,
Yeah.
but
So
that's
you
probably
never
a
know
good
when it's
example of one.
yeah. But yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like you never know what's gonna hit. And then all of
Yeah.
a sudden your app hits and you're like, I've got sorry, we digress. But we did this research project. We put the current foldables on the table. So we did consumer groups, we did surveys, we spoke to experts in the industry. So that was from someone at Cycling UK, which is the UK cycling campaign, to an owner of a cycling brand. So and everyone in between, government, councils, lots of people. So we put the current foldables on the table, and we went. So everyone, why don't you know about them, and why aren't you buying them, or why aren't you using them? So they all basically just went. We distilled it into three C's. So it was either too cumbersome, so the end state that it folds into isn't the right shape to put into a bag. Too expensive, so they're either 100 quid plus, and people didn't want to pay that, or they're too complicated in the way that they fold. So our design brief was basically let's not do those three things. So we said to consumers, if we do those three things and we manage to deliver it and execute it, would you buy it? And we had a resounding that's what you need to do to cut through with
Mm.
a folded bike helmet. So that's what we've done. So that formed the design brief. So I think chatting to users and getting them involved is the most important thing.
Yeah, for
So we
sure.
really it was made for users by users. And we probably, if I'm being honest with the world, need to go back out there because it's been a while and chat to some people and see if what we've created is actually the right thing. But we had to start somewhere.
Yeah. So what were those three, was it three metrics that you had? So what was it? It was like price, it was like ease of
Price, the size,
use.
the size it folds into, and ease of use. But it's not really about size; it's about the shape. So
Yeah.
there's one on the market which folds into a melon shape. It's quite a cool helmet, but it folds into a round melon. And consumers basically said, well, if I've got my laptop, my sunglasses, my whatever in my rucksack, a melon shape doesn't help because it still sticks out.
Yeah.
So what I
Needs to be
really
flat.
need is something that's the shape of my laptop, which just slots in. So hence why we've got that shape. It goes into a frisbee shape essentially, which means that you can just plop it into your bag, and you've got your laptop there and everything else behind
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So which are
That's really
interesting.
cool. And I think if anyone's listening, I mean, this sort of obviously market research, we bang on about this all the time on the podcast, like, knowing what your customers like, but more than that,
Yeah.
like you've done it very methodical where you've gone to your consumers, found out which specific metrics that they value the most, and then kind of map your competitors against those metrics. And you're like, if I can play better here, here, and here, then
Mm.
like we've won. Like that's it. We can get these consumers to pay for our product. I mean, that's kind of what I did for Wing as well. Like you could even map it out as a diagram, right?
Yeah.
That's what I ended up doing. So I think that's a really good process, and it's good to know that that works. Obviously, it works like for physical products for hardware as well. Um, so yeah, it's good. Like that's a
Yeah,
really
well,
good approach.
I mean, to be fair, you make it sound like we were super methodical, but at the time, it was like we were doing multiple things, and Innovate UK just happened to come off, so we got it, and then it allowed us to go through that process that you said.
Yeah.
But I guess in hindsight, you're right. We had three metrics. We built a design brief, and then we've been designing against it ever since. So,
But I mean, in
yeah.
hindsight, right? Like, would you be quicker to get those metrics like very quickly, or do you think that that sort of validation stage went as perfectly as it could have done?
Yeah, I think it's obviously really important, and I think the time that you spend doing your consumer research up front is valuable time spent. There are
Yeah,
obviously quick and dirty ways of doing it. There's loads. I mean, literally, you could just go out there and chat to a few people, and then you go, well, 10 people validated my idea, and you sort of take what you
yeah,
want
yeah,
from
yeah,
it, you pick it, and then you just go develop the thing. But we got a plethora of information from it, the way that we did it. The other thing is, because it's Innovate UK, it was super methodical. So we had to report back every month. So it wasn't like they gave you some cash and went, right, off you go. You had to basically report to them every single month to say, this is what we found, this is what's happening. So it meant that we had to be super sort of concise in what we were doing. But yeah,
mm,
anyone listening trying to develop hardware, as painful as it is, you've got to get out there and spend some time up front chatting to people. Otherwise, you're going to develop something that people just don't want, and that's not what you should do.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's move on. So you
Yeah.
had obviously you got a designer, and he designs a few mock-ups of different sort of concepts of the approach that you could take to build this foldable cycling or scooter helmet. What's the sort of next stage? Like, how do you go after a prototype? Do you go out for like full blown manufacturing? Do you validate that concept more, like with consumers? Like, what's the sort of next step there?
Yeah, I'll whiz you through the journey quickly because it's probably easier if I just do it in one hit and then you can ask me. So we found a designer. We 3D printed our first prototype, and watching the 3D print machine going for the first time was mind blowing because I've never seen it before. It's like this little thing just.
I've never seen it in
So
person. Like, it looks so
it's,
cool. I've never seen it in person.
yeah, it's mad. It's just like the thing that layers and then it just
Yeah,
builds up and up. Then after about 9 years, you end up with a helmet. But yeah, so we found the designer, we created a prototype. We then took that prototype to the London Bike Show, which is a big trade show in London, which unfortunately has been shut down because of the dreaded bug. And we put it on. It was hilarious. I negotiated a deal right at the beginning for super cheap, and we got we had all these massive companies around us with all these fancy stands, and we had a wedding table, if you can imagine the like high wedding table with a white thing on it, and we had a spinning head on it, and we put our prototype on the spinning head. It was just a glass red head, and we had it spinning on the table, and we basically went, right, let's show the world. It was the first time we are going to actually show the public. So we had hundreds, probably thousands of cyclists over 3 days come up to our stand and be like, what's that? What's that? And we basically went, it's a folding helmet. And they went, no, it's not. And we went, it is. And we took it off and we flipped it round and we showed everyone. And they were mind blown because they didn't know folding helmets existed.
yeah,
So that was, and we collected hundreds of emails on our iPads, and people going, "Can I buy one now?" We went, "We're not even anywhere near production. This is just
Yeah.
a prototype." So it was another point of validation that people just went, "That is awesome. Keep going with that." So we London Bike Show was a milestone for us where we gained more confidence. We then went. It started to then get expensive, and I guess you're going to want to talk about funding or investment at some point in the pod. But it became expensive, and we needed to raise some money to keep going with the iterations and the process. So we had a roadmap laid out. We said this is the stages that we need to go through, and it started to get expensive from that point on because we needed to actually start thinking about manufacturing and tooling and
Yeah.
prototypes and safety test rigs and all sorts of stuff. So we managed to secure a pre-seed round of 125k. That was one big angel who chucked us a lifeline. That was weird. He basically went, here's a big chunk of money. I believe in you. Let's do it." And then the rest was made up from friends and family. So we had some cash in the bank, and that enabled us to keep going. So we kept developing. That was the point in which Dom and I went, "Let's leave our job and let's go. We've now got 6 figures in the bank. Let's do it." So we left our job. And then we had to find another designer. So we then made contact with we then launched a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, which we
Cool.
did a tad too early, but maybe let's not talk about that. But we launched it too early, and we basically went, "Hey guys, here it is. Buy it now, and you'll get it in a year's time." Super optimistic, but we sold 1,000 units to 60 different countries. Again, massive proof point, especially for investors later on who went, "Oh,
Mm.
you actually sold 1,000 units," and we had no marketing budget. So London Bike Show, Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, um, and then we found a factory that we started to work with. And then we had another designer who was a specialist in manufacturing. They came together, moved the concept on to an actual manufacturable piece of kit. And now we're working with a factory in Birmingham called Cameron Price, whose top clients are BMW, Jaguar, and all sorts. They're fantastic. They're an injection molding factory, and so we're producing in the UK, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
Um, and we are gearing up for production now. But so we've just closed our big seed round of 1 million. So we've closed that. It's in the bank, which was a very interesting process. Was very hard. And then we are now gearing up for launch. So that's the sort of fly by the
Oh,
night process. In between, there's lots of stuff. Like we've taken it to corporate partners. So we're talking to, can I mention them? One of the best folding bike companies in the UK. And we're talking to loads of scooter companies, but there's lots of stuff in between. But that was
mm.
essentially the process. We tried to do it. We wanted to do it without getting mass amounts of funding, but for a hardware business, it became quite obvious that because you have to invest in manufacturing
Yeah.
tools, which are blocks of aluminium, we had to raise some cash,
Yeah.
and then marketing is expensive and all that stuff.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
does that make sense? That was
That
the
is a
process
big
and where we are.
journey, and I'm kind of like lost for I don't know where to go next with this. Like it
Don't
was just
worry.
so many things. Obviously, like yeah, do I start from the beginning? Do I go like towards the beginning? Do I go towards the end? Um, I really want to find out a bit more about. I guess obviously you took the prototype to the bike show, and people kind of like begging to buy. Like, how quickly would you say you went from prototype to manufacturing stage, and kind of like did you want to rush it? Like, what was the kind of thought process was with the timings? Like, how quickly can you move from prototype to manufacturing, or should you delay it for more validation? Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, well, in one word, very, very slowly. It's something that we might as well tell everyone the brutal honesty, but the it's slow as hell. Trying to take something from a prototype. Well, it's slow for a company whose two founders don't know anything about manufacturing.
Yeah,
I guess is probably the bigger point of it all, because we had a lot of validation, and then we sort of moved to right. We've now validated the product with lots of different people, from as I said, corporate partners to users to cyclists to government bodies to loads of different things. So we sort of put not a line in the sand, but we sort of said, right, I think we validated it enough now. Now we need to get on and actually make it. but the
Yeah.
process of taking it from a concept on a screen, a designed piece of CAD, it's called, where you've got the 3D design, to actually having it in your hands and having it be what you want it to be, and also passing all the safety certifications, is a whole new ball game. And I think the only reason that we've managed to get as far as we've got to is because we've managed to employ or get involved some really uh, specific people who know about these things. So if it wasn't for the factory grabbing hold of it and going, right, guys, I know we usually work with big clients, but actually we love what you're doing. So we're going to help you through the process. If we didn't have people like that, then we wouldn't have got to where we've got to. But it's
Yeah.
super slow turning something from a prototype into a manufacturer, but especially for a product that's essentially protecting your brain that has two pieces to it. Because I think because we're developing a safety product, it's been quite specifically hard, but we're getting there. But we're getting there. If that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like should you want to take your time with moving from prototype to manufacturing stage? Because you might want to take your time with finding a good manufacturer, like you said before. Like they really helped
Yeah.
you. And like I know people want to move quickly in business, but maybe like with your experience, like would you say it was good to take your time with that stage?
Yeah, well, it's a hot topic for me at the moment. We've got a fantastic advisor, a guy called Mark, who came on board to help us raise some of the money. And he keeps saying to me every time I see him, he says, "Josh, entrepreneurs always feel like they need to be doing something all of the time." And I went, "What do you mean?" And he went, "Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing."
Hmm.
And he said that to me so many times. And I guess what he means by that is sometimes you have to let things sit and you've got to take things a little bit slower than you usually would have liked to. So I'm always sitting there as a bouncing bunny, going,
Yeah.
"We've got to do something. We've got to do something. We've got to do something." Let's skip that bit of the process because I just want to get it out. But I think what I'm learning to do, even as a 27-year-old, is to slow down in the moments that are really important. Obviously, you want to do things quickly, right? You still want to be efficient and quick, but there are times where you need to slow down. So I think we spend a good amount of time validating it, and I think everybody should spend a good amount of time on that. And then I think when you come to the actual manufacturing of it, you need to spend an equal amount of time, but making sure you've got specialists to help you get through
Yeah,
it. Yeah, I
for
mean,
sure.
it's an interesting one
Yeah.
time because sometimes you want to move really quickly, but sometimes you just can't.
Yeah, yeah.
And especially when you've got, especially in hardware, because I've got friends who are developing tech, and they can move quickly because it's just a matter of
Exactly.
them. Well, not just a matter, but they can tap on the keys, and they end up with something on the screen, and they can send it out to a bunch of people, and it's there. With us, you've got to wait for China to do some stuff. You've got to wait for these big tools to be created. You've then got postage. You've then got prototyping, and they all are just waiting time that is out of
Yeah.
your control because you're somewhere 1,000 miles away in that direction. So
Mm.
yeah, time's interesting.
That's really
It is.
interesting. Josh, I want to like use the last like few minutes to kind of talk about funding a little bit because how does funding work in the case of say physical products? As in, when do you say when do you kind of go for funding? Because obviously you said there's a stage where you need funding to be able to fund the manufacturing run or a bit of research or whatever. Um, but as you said before as well, you can get funding with just a prototype. So at what stage, if anyone's thinking about doing a physical product business, at what stage would you say funding is the right time for you?
Mm. Well, I think the first thing to say, and it's obviously really easy to say, is that if you don't have to raise money, don't. That's the first thing. People think the shiny bright lights of getting investors on board is the best thing to do. But if you can, bootstrap it or fund it yourself. But obviously, people aren't in that privileged position. So we had some really good advice from one of our really early advisors, a guy called Brett. He founded a company called Streetcar, which sold to Zipcar for some decent bucks quite a few years ago. But he was guiding our investment strategy from the beginning. Um, and he basically said you need to get to certain milestones, which means that your company is more valuable to investors. And then once you get to that milestone, you think about the next milestone, and you keep going, and you raise as little as you possibly can to retain as much of your business as possible
Yeah.
to get to that next milestone. So it's all about breaking it down into chunks. So, and I think every business is completely different. Every business is different. For us, we bootstrapped, we used as much money as we could personally until we got to a certain point where we just had to spend money and there was no getting away from it.
Yeah.
And there are creative ways of you get a corporate partner in and they give you some money up front and that's how you fund it. But I guess it comes to a point in a hardware business's life cycle where you just have to start creating, and that point of creation costs money. So you've got to raise at that point. But raising is not, obviously it's a very long process, and
Yeah.
it's hard, really hard. But if you have the right value to investors and the right proposition, then you'll be okay. So I think when the time's right is probably my answer to your question. That's a really long-winded way of answering it. But when the time is right for your business and you personally is when you raise the cash,
Yeah.
not if you think, oh, I want to say that I've raised a seed round or I've raised a pre-seed. Do you know what I mean? That should not drive it. It should always be driven by milestone and when you actually need to raise the cash. That would be my advice to anyone.
I think that's a really wonderful note to end on, actually, because I feel like, especially for I guess our generation and like all the people I kind of speak to, who want to get into entrepreneurship, they see kind of the shining lights of Silicon Valley, and
Yeah,
they see all the news and things like that come out of it, and it's like, this company's raised 5 million in funding, this company's raised this much in funding, and I almost sometimes feel like that funding is kind of the aim. As I don't know if you've seen that with certain sort of people, but
completely.
like,
Yeah, completely.
yeah, but it shouldn't be like that.
No, no, mate. I literally couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not gonna shout out. I'm not anyway. I won't put any of my mates in it, but I have friends who are literally going after the goal of grand exit. And it's important to have aspirations, and it's important to. Um, I think at the beginning of a company, if your end goal is to sell the thing, and I do know some companies that's worked for, because everything they've done is to play in the space, which means they ultimately get bought, which means that they go through the whole structured funding round. But
yeah,
I personally think, and I think it takes the sort of passion out of it, that if you're just going for that exit in 5 years' time and everything's leading to that, I don't know where the fun of it is, to be honest.
mm,
I mean, it's probably really fun if you sell your business for 100 million and you get loads of money, fine. But I just don't understand where the sort of passion is when all you're trying to do is sell it to someone. So I hate that, to be
mm,
honest. I really do. I mean, because when we were raising investors, of course, they ask you, what's your exit strategy? And you sort of make up some cock and bull about, oh, yes, well, I'm going to sell it in 5 years' time to a massive company and we're going to all make loads of money. So invest in us now. And that would be nice. But I think what entrepreneurs should do is remain focused and passionate on their end goal. And I think that end goal shouldn't be, I want to sell the company. It should be, I want my product to give value to the people that I want to give
mm,
value to. And therefore, it may then be valuable to someone else to purchase. I think
yeah,
that's the way around it should be. And as you say, a lot of people think that, it's sexy to be an entrepreneur now. And I'm not going to lie. I love it when I write founder and CEO on a piece of paper somewhere. It makes me feel good about myself. But what I should really be writing is firefighter. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I'll tell you a point, mate. I hate it. I don't think that's what people should be
yeah.
going for. Shouldn't sort of
Well, I
get
really
to.
hope that people have stayed to the very end of the podcast, because I think that's a really nice note to end on. Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, talking about Newlane. How can people stay in touch with you and Newlane going into the future? Because you just launched, right? So I know loads of people must be excited to see, or you're about to launch.
Yeah, we haven't launched yet. We haven't launched yet. We're launching soon, the end of the year.
Okay.
If you go to newlanehelmet.com, what a terrible plug that was. Newlanehelmet.com. I mean, chuck me a follow on LinkedIn or something. We'll be launching our social channels soon. But yeah, launching towards the end of the year is the plan.
Sweet.
So thanks. It's been great.
No, my pleasure. Thank you so much again, Josh, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Perfect.